Fat Mike is a really good bass player. And he played the verse to a song. I was like, man, you could come up with something much better than that on the verse. He's like, it's good. And I go, it's not.
Welcome, everyone, to This Was The Scene, the podcast that takes a look back at the late 90s, early 2000 punk scene. I am your host, Mike Doyle. Before we start, go text a friend a link to your favorite episode and get them to start following this thing, because more followers equals awesomeness for the podcast. Ryan Greene is an American record producer, sound engineer, former owner of Crush Recording Studios in Scottsdale, Arizona, and founder of Area 52 Entertainment in Los Angeles, California. In an over 25-year-long career, he has worked with many artists including Jay-Z, Lita Ford, Tonic, Megadeth, Alice Cooper, Cheap Trick, Usher, Patti LaBelle, and Gladys Knight. Ryan was like the guy when it came to producing the bands that were on Fat Records, or Fat Wreck Chords, as the guy says it in that Sellout book. The book's great, but the way that guy says that just fucking kills me. Or the Warped Tour. It's fucking murder, but the book's still great. Some of the bands that you know and love that he recorded are NOFX, Lagwagon, No Use for a Name, Propaghandi, Pulley, High Standard, Tilt, Bracket, and a shit ton of others that probably graced your CD collection. This interview has been in the works for like 3 years. I've been texting him for literally 3 years. And we finally just found a Saturday to sit down and talk, and it was awesome. There's so many good stories in this interview. It's just little tiny things that maybe he's told in other interviews, but if you haven't heard any of them, then these will be great. And even if you have heard him in other interviews, then maybe they're still as cool. I don't know. So we got him on the Skype, and that's what we chat about. Demoing Stranger Than Fiction, what the word demo means to him, figuring out the emotion of each record he records, Punk and Drublick's mastering debacle, recording Haas, some of the tricks he learned during sessions, recording Less Talk More Rock by Propaghandi, recording Guttermouth, Tony Sly, and a ton more. That's all I got to say, so feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone who would love some punk rock nostalgia. With that said, let's get started. Every time I start this off, I'm always asking people how they got in the scene. Like, were you actually involved in the scene, or did you just record bands that were in the scene?
Why don't you clarify that?
Meaning, like, did you grow up listening to punk rock?
No.
See, that I was like, everyone I talked to was like they were involved in going to local shows or whatever it was, but you weren't at all.
No, I came from a completely different perspective. I was chief engineer at EMI Music at the time, and Brett Gurwitz from Bad Religion, who owned Epitaph, came in with Bad Religion one day. I didn't know the band. I didn't know him. He walks in the door and he says, have you ever recorded punk music? And I was like, The Clash? Punk? And he goes, no. He goes, it's a little poppier than that. I was like, okay, no. What was the last band you recorded? And I said, Megadeth. And he goes, oh, yeah, this is definitely poppier. Like, yeah. So, we sit there and we're just we're shooting the shit. The rest of the band starts loading in, get them set up. He goes, well, I'm a guitar player. At the time, I didn't even know that he owned a record label. He goes, I'm the guitar player, one of the writers, and I'm going to be singing because our singer, Greg, isn't here. He's a teacher or something, and he's not even in town, whatever. And I was like, okay, man, well, whatever you want. We get the band set up. We start going through the recording process. Brett, at one point, has some lyric sheets, and we were doing at the time, I don't know if you know these songs, Stranger Than Fiction, Incomplete, and Affected.
Wait, that was the record they were working on?
So they were working on demos. This is all pre-production, but there was no such thing to me as demos. I grew up in a world that nothing is a demo, because a lot of things that we would do you would say it was a demo, and then they would take the masters, and then you'd hand those off. Somebody else would come in, add a few more things, and then it would be a record. So I'd always call these things like mini records or whatever, just something that was more detailed than a demo, because they didn't sound anything like a demo. They were basically full-blown production tracks. he pulls out the lyrics for Stranger Than Fiction. At that time, a pretty popular writer, producer, Diane Warren, came down to the studio to check it out. She was brought in by one of the executives just to look at the studio, see if she may want to work there. She and Brett started to talk. Brett showed her the lyrics for Stranger Than Fiction, and she read one of the lyrics, and she looked at him, and she was like, these are really good. I was like, oh, wow, Diane Warren says that Brett Gerwitz's lyrics are really good. It's like, and I still had no idea, this band, Bad Religion. Okay. Again, never heard of them.
Oh my God. And this is like what number record of theirs too? I mean, they had like what, 6 out prior to this or something?
I have, you know more than I because that's exactly when I came in. I know, one of the Rancid records were just getting ready to be done by Brett, but that's really all I know.
Yeah, that was 7. They had 7 releases before going in there. Okay, sorry, go on. Jesus.
Yeah,
Christ.
no, it's, like I said, you know more than I. So we continue working on the project. So we tracked 3 songs that day. Next days we came in, we did vocals and did some really quick mixes. And I wasn't thinking anything of it. It was just like, okay, it's just another project in. And at the end of the project, I give Brett a cassette. Yes, a cassette of the 3 songs. And the band had already packed up and left. And he turned to me and he goes, hey, man, he goes, do you ever do outside records? And I was like, yeah, I do quite a bit. And he goes, man, he goes, I have this little punk label. Would love to get you connected with one of my bands. And I was like, sure. I go, that'd be great. At that time, you'd work with a lot of people that would say things and go, oh yeah, we would like to do, connect you with this person or that person. And it never happened. But it was a thought. It's like, okay, well, thank you so much. Brett leaves. I'm cleaning up the studio, and he comes back in 10 minutes later, and I was like, oh, did you forget something? And he goes, man, this is the best sounding thing that we've ever done. He goes, I really want to get you connected with one of the bands on our label. They're called NOFX. And I'm like, okay. I go, that'd be great. And he goes, if you could put together a little, like a demo reel, I'll send it over to Fat Mike. And I'm like, Fat Mike? And Brett was like, yeah, Fat Mike, he's the singer, writer, bass player for the band. And I was like, okay. And I was like, I knew nothing from nothing. I sent the demo over, my little production reel, which were all like really pretty heavy rock songs.
Yeah, like was Megadeth part of that mix?
No, was unable to send anything out from Megadeth because what we worked on wasn't released.
Oh wow, okay.
So I had to do things that were that I did that nobody knew, because everything that I was doing at EMI, they were all big artists. I sent it over. 3 weeks later, I'm in doing Punk and Trouble.
Oh my God.
And and that's where I met the band. I met Mike on the phone, but the rest of the band I met the day that we started the record.
What was he? Because I've seen so many interviews with him, and he's just Fat Mike is Fat Mike. But from what I've heard, he's got a great business sense, and he's like no bullshit. When you're talking to him prior to the recording, what did you sense? So what did you get from him?
I think at the time, because Fat was just kind of starting to get its wings. He just sounded direct. He sounded like he knew what he wanted. We really didn't talk a lot about business. Like, this is my day rate. This is this is this. I'm going to come up there. Okay, this is what I'm going to bring. Just as an overall sense of what Fat Mike was back then. You knew that he was intelligent, but just a kind of a normal dude. There wasn't anything that would have stood out. It was no different than working with Brett or Megadeth guys. It's you walk into a studio, everybody's kind of normal, at least to me. That's about it.
When you're going from doing Megadeth, like what other prior to this, just kind of list off a couple things you worked on, because it'll lead up to the question I'm going to ask.
I'm sorry, some of the things that I have worked on before.
Like before, right? So right before Greg and them, or they came in for doing the demos for Stranger the Fiction. Like, kind of like, what big things did you do right before you did those demos?
I mean, I think right before the week before I worked with Bad Religion was Megadeth, and right before that was Lita Ford. And I came from the world where I started off working with Patti LaBelle, Gladys Knight, Megadeth, Alice Cooper, Lita Ford, a band called Tonic. There was a lot of bands that I had worked with behind the scenes at the time, and it was just I never really put too much thought in it. It was just you show up for a session, you do a record, or you do a demo, which I hate that word, or you do a mini record. 5 days later, you turn around and you do something else. I just have a lot of something else's.
Why do you hate the word demo?
Because I feel that anytime somebody puts their time and energy into something, I think the word demo makes it sound like there wasn't a lot of care put into it. It's just a demo. It's like, no, it's not just a demo. It's your time and energy into something that you really love. And that's something that's really important. It's like when somebody hands you the presentation and how people would present their CD or their cassette back in the day. Hey, listen to this. We went in and it was really quick and it doesn't sound that good, or there's some mistakes, vocals are a bit out of tune, and they give you this whole laundry list of negatives before you even listen to it, versus somebody coming up and handing you something going, hey, this is the best thing that you're ever going to hear. Take a listen, let me know what you think. And I much rather have that.
Do you think that bands shouldn't do a pre-recording before they do the full recording? You think they should just go, like, do you want to hear that, or do you want someone to come in and you have no clue what they sound like if you haven't heard of them?
Well, back in when we were doing all these records, there were times where we would get a band recording in a room. Rarely were they full-blown recordings. I always prefer getting in the room with a band, listening. That way, if there are any changes, you can make them on the spot in rehearsal versus getting into the studio. But sadly, we didn't have that time. Most records were getting done in 8 days, 14 days, and it was back to back to back. The best way for me to approach the record was if they get everything set up, play the song, make suggestions, and then break it down to a click track, drums, and maybe scratch guitar and a vocal, and go through, get the drum parts worked out, and then start building the project on top of that.
So you'd almost want to have like kind of like a live version it's happening in the studio. So you go through it, do the basic tracks, listen to that, and then go, all right, now we're going to clean this up and do the better version.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately back then that would have been the best approach if they didn't come in with something. Otherwise, you have no idea what the song even is. I mean, how are you going to decide what the tones are even going to be? Because what people are using, a lot of these bands had equipment that was falling apart, guitars that didn't stay in tune, amps that needed repair. I just needed some sort of general sense of what they were and have the conversation, and what do you want to be? You could play a song and you could produce it many different ways, but what are you looking for these songs? What kind of emotion are you looking for? Every bit of music that you listen to should generate some sort of emotion. It's not about the best sound, it's about the right sound. Decide what you want. Do you want the song to feel angry? Do you want it to feel happy? Do you want it to be romantic? Do you want to be able to put it on before you have sex? It's like something. Tell me what you want from the song, and let's work together to emote that passion and that energy to that song.
The reason I asked that other question before is because I was just saying, like, okay, you said like Lita Ford, Megadeth, like Tonic, like all these bands you would record. Then Bad Religion comes in, you have no idea who they are. So then Diane Warren's like, these lyrics are great. So you're like, okay, this is something new I haven't seen. Then he's like, yeah, this band, Fat Mike's part of it, NOFX. When you're going to do that after doing this laundry list of recordings before that, did you kind of think you were taking a step down because you didn't know who these bands were?
No. To me, I loved working with established bands is wonderful because they're established. They already have their thing. They've kind of already gone through the process. I love working with bands that haven't gone through the process. There are many bands that I have worked with that have come forward over the last years. Like Russ from Good Riddance came up to me once and he said, "I just want to let you know we could not do the records we do today if it wasn't for everything we learned from you in the past. So thank you." That's emotional to me. That means I added something. There was something positive that I was able to add to their experience. When a band goes into the studio, there has to be so much trust in the person that is truly driving the boat.
When NOFX comes in and they're doing Punk and Triple, I really want to I'm not going to break down every single record you've done. It's going to be just kind of like sometimes I want to dive into them and then give an overview outside of that. But when they came in, did they have because you said you want to have a lead with an emotion. Did you have that feeling back then? And when they came in, did you ask them that question? Like, what do you want people to feel from this?
Well, it was back then. It was we're at the studio. I asked where they normally would put the drums. Where did you put your drums on the last record? We put them over here. I would probably like to put them over here, but we don't have a lot of time. We had 14 days to do 17 songs produced, engineered, and mixed. There was no time to play around. So I remember getting the drum sound in the place that they did the last record, and I was fighting it the whole time. And the whole time I was thinking I could have spent another half hour, moved the drums, and put them in the place that I really wanted. But we got them tuned up. This is what it's going to be, and it had a thing to it. And then we went to go do guitar, and they had their guitar rigs that they normally use live, and I was like, these tones are not doing anything for me. So I made a phone call to a friend of mine that brought down some guitars. I had just worked with the band Europe, and the Final Countdown.
Yeah.
When they were in town, they rented Head 10, Cabinet 13 at SIR, and I knew that sounded good. So we had somebody run over there. That combination was available. We just rotated out guitars when Hefe was playing to find the right guitar for the right sound. And when I heard the tone, it was like, this works. This has a thing to it. And it's not about the best, it's about the right. And it just worked.
I mean, I'm just imagining the guitar sound for Linoleum. That's the first thing that's coming to my head.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. To me, I just can't do anything generic. It has to hit me emotionally. I'm an emotional dude. It just has to do something. It just can't be like, yeah, this is a good guitar tone. I don't want just a good guitar tone. What is it doing? How's it making you feel? Make you want to play harder? Faster? What? So that's kind of my approach when going into these records, because, again, they're fast and furious. You don't have a lot of time to work on things. You have to hear it, go, this works, this doesn't work. If it doesn't work, what does it need? I need to do this right now. I have about another 30 seconds before we're going to be out of time.
Yeah, I was wondering, because I'm looking at the list of releases you had in like even 97 or 95 alone or whatever, and there's so many. But I guess that makes sense, because sometimes you hear the stories where bands are like, yeah, we were in the studio for like 7 months, and I was like, there's no way that was happening with you. It sounds like the majority of time you had during those early 90s, mid 90s to late 90s, you just had weeks, right, with a lot of the fat bands? Or did any of them actually get a little bit more time as the years were progressing?
As the years progressed, I mean, when we ended up in the 2000s, it started to lighten up. But you have to remember that in 95, 96, I was still chief engineer at EMI. So I was still doing that gig. So I was running out for a week and a half, 2 weeks to do a record, come back doing something else, then get a call from Mike. Hey, I have another band that wants to record. When? In a week. Okay. Send a memo upstairs, letting them know that, hey, I'm going to be out for another week. Go out there, do an 8-day record, turn around, come back, be back in the studio at EMI. And it was just that constant back and forth for those first few years until I ended up moving up to the Bay Area.
Do you think that worked in your favor, having such a time crunch for those bands in the beginning?
Yeah, I think that it kind of a twofold. One, you can't second guess yourself. It truly becomes, it is what it is. If you're good with that, then it works for you. If you're somebody who will labor over something for hours and hours and hours, it will not work for you. I just felt that I'm always good at walking in going, okay, I'm going to get the best that we possibly can for the time that we have to do it. And that is it. We're not going to worry about anything. Bands will do what they do. I'll do what I do. Together we'll do this project. We'll have a collection of songs, and we're going to capture a moment in time, and that is what we're going to do. And we'll do it to the best of our ability. There are so many things that have gone haywire in the studio. You read a review and somebody makes a comment about something, and it was just like, yep, that I can understand that's your perception of it, but you have no idea what it was like in the studio, the environment, things that were happening, things that had to be managed, all of those things. Sometimes it is a lot, but yeah, you still go into it with, you do the best you can for the time that you had to do it. And normally I would get to the studio at 11 a.m., be up and rolling by 11:15. I'd be walking out the door anywhere from 2 to 3 in the morning. And that was, 7 days a week, sometimes a year and a half straight. Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, Thanksgiving, all birthdays. I never took any of those off. It was always go, go, go. There was budgets. I mean, I would do a mix finish a mix at 3, 4 in the morning. It'd be the last mix for a project, and there would be a courier that would show up at the studio door at 5 a.m. to take the tapes, because we weren't using computers back then. Take the tapes, take those to the airport, put them on a plane. Somebody would be here in LA to take those tapes over to the mastering engineer, because we had a mastering session at 10 a.m. I don't know how many of the bands look back on it and think how fast and furious it was, but we were rotating bands out constantly. I'd finish a band at 3, 4, 5 in the morning, go home, sleep, wake up, be at the studio the next day. We would have another band loading in. My assistant, Adam Kramer, would already have the microphones out, putting the drums where they need to go. And I'd walk in, sit down with the drum kit, start tuning the drum kit as we're talking to the band, and then have the conversation. Okay, here we go. What are we going to do?
When you have a release come out, like Punk and Drublic comes out, and it's like people just fucking go nuts for it. Did you have a lens with your head down? Your head's down in the studio every single day, 24 hours a day, basically. And it's like, did you even have a way to just kind of pay attention, say, how is this record doing right now?
Well, there was a mastering snafu on that record. I won't call mastering engineers out by name, but I didn't appreciate his attitude. By the time I was allowed into the room to hear what they were doing to it, I was not happy. And then I took the mastered version home and listened to it. And at the time, I was married to my first wife, and I'm sitting at the stereo just listening, and she goes, "Oh, is this the record you just did?" And I go, "Yep, this will be the last record I ever do in this scene. This thing sounds horrible."
Wow.
She goes, "It can't be that bad." And I said, "I've done better sounding demos than this record." And then, of course, this record goes, and it's becomes more of a staple in the industry.
Is that why you were laughing? Because you just knew that you put something out and you're like, I was not a fan of this, and it just went gangbusters.
Yeah, yeah. And it took me a while to kind of sit back and go, well, you know what? We captured a moment in time, and just have to let it go. But the pre-master versus mastering, it's like it was two different thought processes. And obviously both probably would have worked, but the end of the process left a really bad taste in my mouth. And it wasn't the music or the band. It was because going to a mastering engineer, and it's kind of like the cherry on top of the record, he was just disrespectful.
Was that the only time you worked with him?
No, we somebody else I did a record for, worked with them, and they turned around afterwards and had it remastered by somebody else.
Oh, wow. So, okay, I was going to ask if you had the same thing happen where you got the master and you're like, oh, shit.
Yeah, I think it was just, to me, it was approached by, well, This isn't a big band. This is this like a little punk rock band. It was that kind of attitude.
Oh, okay.
It's like, well, fuck that. You know what? People put their time and energy into this. You respect this like every other project that comes in your door.
What did NOFX think when they heard it?
I think everybody liked it.
When I hear that record, I feel it's like, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, but it feels just compressed, and that's what made it work. Is that like the sound that you heard, or am I not hitting it on the head?
No, I think that's I think that it was just. And here's the thing: very little compression was done in the mix, so all of that you're hearing is in the mastering.
Yeah, it's like tight as fuck the entire time.
Yeah, but it was recorded tight. I made sure that I kind of recorded it. It was my first punk rock record, so I was like, okay, this is fast, so I'm going to approach it like if it was a speed metal record.
Basically, that comes out. Did Mike just start because I'm looking at the list, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. It was like Good Riddance, then High Standard, Lagwagon's Haas, No Use for a Name, Lech Con Carne. Like these bands just all start rolling in at like 95. It looks like 94, 95. So was he just throwing everybody at you? Like, oh yeah, we're sending everybody to you.
Yeah, we kind of worked out a deal. Mike was really good at budgets. I have this much money to do this record. Can you do it? Oh, sure. I have this much money to do this record. Can you do it? Yeah, sure. And then we just ended up building the relationship. It kind of developed a sound for Fat Records. Bands were getting to know me, know my personality, know that I have no B game. If I go in, and everything is on 10 with me. That's why I could I could rotate band members out all day long. Oh, okay, bass player's getting tired. Let's put in the guitar player. Guitar player's getting tired. Let's put in the singer. Singer's getting tired. And I could do that. I could do that for 18 hours a day, which I did.
Did you have any bands come in that were kind of like a little bit loose when they came in, and then after working with you, you just saw them get more focused and tighter as the session was going on?
Every single band. Yeah, there's no doubt. You could honestly ask all of them. From where they started and where I started in my perception to where we ended, it definitely gave them a different perspective. Eric Sanded gave me a quite a nice compliment one night. I had already moved to Arizona, and I went to one of their shows, and after their encore, he sees me, comes over and gives me the biggest hug, and he says, "I wouldn't be the drummer I am today if it wasn't for you." It was kind of a similar comment that Russ made. There's a lot that went in to these records and how people played and things for them to think about. I'm not saying about a drum beat, just technically things for them to do and to make it easier, or things that they're doing, maybe gripping the guitar too hard, or leaning the guitar back, which is pulling it out of tune, or leaning it forward and it's pulling out of tune, or their pick angle is wrong, hitting the drums too hard. And working with everybody on the little things, because it was the little things that turned into bigger things.
Do you play music yourself?
I'm a drummer. Well, I should say I used to be a drummer. I would not put myself up against any of the today's drummers by any means. Eric Sandlin and I had a drum off in the studio once. Who could play faster? Let's say I lost by a lot.
Is that because of that, like that do that, like that Fat Records?
Yeah, the do that. Yeah, I thought I was doing really good, but the faster I would get, the more tense I would get, and the faster he would get, the more relaxed. It was hilarious. We had some good times.
When all the bands were coming in and doing like that beat, that it became that very famous Fat Records beat. I mean, to this day, people are like, "Oh, it's a Fat band" because they have that beat. Because there's a certain sound to it in a lot of these releases. Like that kick drum really comes through because it's almost like part of the fucking song. Like just when all these bands kept coming in and doing that, were you getting like kind of sick of it?
No, I just thought that the overall songs were clever. I think people really put a lot of time and energy in it. Tony Sly would call me about a year out from doing a record and talk about the songs that he's writing, and sometimes sending them, and you would hear so much detail in them that a lot of people that may not know punk rock music may go, oh, they're just 3-chord songs. It's like whatever. But there's so much more that goes into the writing process. So to me, there is no song that sounds similar. I can't take this drum beat's the same as this and this and this. It's like, well, there are many songs out there in the world that have similar drum beats. It's what you're doing over them.
So when you do Haas in 95, is that when you record? Because this came out in 95.
Yeah.
Okay. When you're doing that, like, I mean, that had a lot of dynamic. I mean, I'm not taking away from any of the releases that Fat Bands did, but like Haas is one of my favorite records, and it slows down. Like the songs are kind of just straightforward. Like they're not as fast sometimes, and then they are fast. So it kind of starts to break up the whole just consistently fast the whole time. Like, so when they came in and started working with that, like, were you kind of like, oh, this is gonna be fun to work with?
Didn't even think about it.
Mm.
Derek played on that record.
Yeah.
Derek was going through a bit of a rough time during the making of that record. As most people that know him, I think it's been written. That record was tracked at a studio called Fat Planet, which was owned by Max Norman, who did the first 3 Ozzy records, Megadeth, Y&T. He was one of my big mentors. When we recorded that record, the majority of it was done at Max's studio. I think that there is something different about Haas, but what I most feel was not really the studio or the sound, it was the songwriting. Songwriting was really good. Violins and Bomb Away.
Oh yeah.
Just saying those 2 songs gives me goosebumps. There's something about those songs, how Joey sang them, how the band performed them, everything from top to bottom. Again, I liked how they came out on the live record better than the studio record. Only because when we were mixing the studio record, we didn't have very much time to do it. Again, you're reaching the point of burnout at the end of every record. Here we are. I can't remember how many songs Haas had on it, but more than likely at least 15. And you have 3 days to mix 15 songs. Ready, go. Where most people are mixing maybe a song or 2 a day, I'm mixing 5 songs a day. Some of these projects couldn't really dive into the sonic part and help build the dynamic, but I feel that the band played very dynamically. And I think that that's a part of the magic to that record and those songs. But that goes back to the songwriting. Joey was really, really good about knowing what he was looking for emotionally from the songs.
When they're playing it, I don't know, was there like a magic in the room when you're like recording songs being like, holy shit, like this kicks fucking ass?
Yeah, you really didn't really didn't know what you had until you started to put vocals on it. Joey might be in the back of the control room humming along, but until the vocals get on it, then all of a sudden it's the magic. As soon as he starts singing, there's something magical about Joey's voice too that I've always liked.
Yeah.
The magic part comes with when doing the vocals.
I mean, it's like when I hear that record, it's done. Everything is put together. It's in front of me. I'm listening to it with new ears and thinking this is crazy. But you're literally listening to these records being built from scratch, and then he gets in the vocal booth, and you have no idea what he sounds like singing prior to that.
Correct.
Wow.
I mean, I they gave me a record before, but what somebody sounds like before is not necessarily what they're going to sound like the next time. Kind of gave me a general idea of the band. Yeah, when Joey got out there and just sang the first verse and going, okay, I really get this now.
Oh man.
It's just it's always approach. Everything always comes down to approach. How are you going to do something, and how are you going to do that in an amount of time that is not healthy for a singer? How is a singer supposed to sing 5 songs in one day at the projection of what some of these songs require? This goes out to all the bands, that every one of them, from the drummers to the singers, that everybody put everything they possibly could into everything that we did. That kind of what makes the collection of songs that are out there, I think, special. Nobody came in with a B game. Everything was an A.
Real quick, if you're looking for an explainer video or someone to do motion graphics for your company, check out my company, drive80.com, and you can email me at mike@drive80.com for more info. That's all I got to say. So now back to the interview. Were you like the proponent of the harmonies? Because harmonies were like a big thing. I feel like a lot of bands, no one really knows about that shit until they hear another record, or they might be like, oh, we don't do that. When they came in, were you the one being, all right, we're going to harmonize this? And they're like, what are you talking about?
The end of Leave It Alone, that whole bend down.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was something I came up with. It originally held straight, and at the time, I loved the band Cheap Trick. I was like, oh, this would be cool if it just kind of did a Robin Zander bend down. There were things like that I would add. As far as like overall, the band would have a good idea. It's like Mike is really good at harmony. Joey, it's like all the bands. Everybody loves harmony. There were times when we would work together. There were times where they would go, hey, we want to do this. So it was, I think everything is, when you're in the studio, it's all collective.
Were you paying attention to other producers that were around you at that time? No, just kept your head down.
Nope. Nope. I didn't care, frankly, what anybody else was doing.
Oh, shit.
And it had nothing to do with ego. It had to do with, if I listen to somebody else that's doing something in this scene, then that may affect how I approach a project. I don't want to hear another idea. I want everything to be organic. So the things that I would listen to, there were times I was driving home from San Francisco to L.A. The Alanis Morissette record came out, Jagged Little Pill. I think I listened to that all the way home for like 5 hours. I would do things like that. I would not listen to any punk rock band.
I was gonna say, like, did you actually find that you started to like that music, or like that became part of your catalog to listen to? But it sounds like it didn't.
No, it didn't. But that's kind of if I'm working on a project, I'm not going to listen to anything that's similar to that project. I don't want anything to take with the kind of the again, it goes back to the feeling and the emotion of the project. I don't want to listen to something and go, oh, wow, I really like their guitar sound. I wonder what that would sound like on a NOFX record. I wouldn't do that. I would listen to a song and come up with a guitar sound with a guitar player that was unique to what they do, not what somebody else has done. It's already been done. Why would I want to recreate that? Unless when I was working on Guitar Hero 3, of course, I'm recreating that stuff because it has to be, everything has to sound identical. But other than that, man, be unique. Come up with different things. Find things that work within your song that will inspire you to do something else.
So were there like a couple tricks that you would learn from the first couple Fat records that you did? Like, because it's got like you have let's see here, you got Punk and Drublic, Forgotten Country by Good Riddance, then it's like Growing Up a High Standard, Haas, Lagwagon. So when you're going to the next record, are there like little tricks that you would take in from the previous session that you would learn and like implement them?
Yeah, absolutely. After doing NOFX, the Punk and Drublic record, I realized that I need to stick a little bit more to my guns. If I don't like where something is set up, take a moment to move it. I have very, very few regrets in my life since then, but thinking that, wow, it would have taken me 5 minutes to 10 minutes to move everything over. And that way, I'll never have to think about that again. If you think that it could be better, try that other thing. I try to never to use the word no in the studio. It's like, it's much easier to go, yeah, let's give that a go, versus arguing about it and then ending up trying it anyhow. Keep the energy and keep the positivity, moving forward at all times. Other than that, it had to do a lot with drums. I was a big fan of keeping drums sounding really open, but when you're playing really fast, they can only sound, you don't want to dampen them too much. So I came up with techniques to be able to let the drums breathe and going, okay, it's going to be a really fast song. I'm going to tune the kick drum and pad it out so it doesn't, there's no overring, kind of what you were saying. Everything sounds really tight.
Yeah.
And that was all of that was like, that was very, very intentional because I needed something really tight to create a sound for what everybody wanted the project to be. And then moving on to guitars, it's like, okay, well, the guitars are ringing a little too much. Maybe take a little piece of foam and, put it behind the bridge, but not too much, because you need the guitar to ring a little bit, and you don't want it to be too thick because you don't want to knock the guitar out of tune. So how do you do this? How do you create the perfect octave sound? Well, you take guitar strings off the guitar, and you leave both E strings on, and then you take the A string, move that to the D string, and now you could just play just those two notes. Everybody's like, how do you get that octave sound? Well, nobody knew.
Wow.
We took guitar strings off and made an octave guitar to make it sound like, in a way, almost unbelievable.
I've never heard of that trick before.
There's a laundry list of things that would be done, but it was all to help the time factor, and that was the whole thing. How do we do these records and make them special enough that tonally they're okay, where everybody could walk away and go, okay, I really like that.
What release did you come up with that idea? Do you remember?
Oh, I don't. It was pretty early on.
Yeah, it's like someone told me the perfect. Not told me. I heard a podcast. This guy Brendan Kelly, is in this band Lawrence Arms, and he was saying the perfect guitar slide sound. They're using a butter knife down the strings. I was like, that's dope.
Oh yeah, find a quarter or a silver dollar, and use a beer bottle for a slide. It's like, come on, man. It's just like, which has been done by every 60s or 70s guitar player. Oh yeah, you just grab your beer bottle and use your beer bottle for a slide.
I feel like you almost treat your sessions like a puzzle. Like you're going in kind of like, all right, the sound's in my head, and I have a lot of tricks from doing this for so many years. So you're like, how can I kind of like formulate what I know and some things I don't know to make this happen? I feel like that would make it exciting. That
is a really good analogy, because that's exactly what happens. Because how do you know what the record is going to sound like when you're just doing a drum track? Well, as soon as we have something that, because it all goes back to the foundation. You tune up the drums, have the drummer play. It's like, yeah, that's not doing something for me, and you kind of tweak it around. As soon as you kind of know the tempo, the whole thing, for me, I can almost see the project finished. I could feel it. I just know it.
Did you ever have to go back and redo drums when you were already up to guitar?
Two projects. Actually, two projects. I think it was two projects, but that was only because the band rewrote the record.
Really?
Yeah, Propaghandi.
The next thing I was going to start talking about Propaghandi, was that on Let's Talk More Rock?
Yeah, so...
Oh my God.
It was. And the craziest thing was the first version that we recorded was absolutely insanely magical. And any engineer that has had this happen will know what I'm talking about. When we finished tracking, you could just pull up the faders and you wouldn't need to do anything. It already sounded mixed. There was nothing. There was nothing that I could do. And I remember taking a cassette and driving back to LA, and I played it for a friend of mine who was doing a record, and they were on their fifth week of doing rhythm guitars for a 12-song record. I mean, you're talking a high-end record. And I played him the rough mix of Let's Talk More Rock, and he was like, "How long did it take you to do this?" And I said, "Well, what? I've been gone for 9 days, and we had to stop the project because couldn't finish the lyrics." And he was like, "How the hell did you do that?" And I was like, "Well, I did that because the players in the band were that good."
The message that Chris gives off is so political, and that record's so just like pissed off. You think, for some reason, from the outside perspective, you think when someone portrays that, they're just like that all the time. And then sometimes you'll hear like, no, they're actually the complete opposite. They don't really talk about it as much. Like, what was he like in the studio? Was he as what people would think he's like, or is he complete opposite and just chill?
He was always chill in the studio, but look at when he puts on the guitar, he is
he's a monster.
he is a monster. I mean, if I ever had a super band, he would definitely be one of the two guitar players for sure, no doubt.
It was funny. I saw him on, I think I read this right. It was like he tweeted something months ago about hockey or something. He was into it. I was like, he likes hockey?
We were doing one of the records, and we were watching a hockey game, and they had the blue puck. You would hit the puck, and there would almost be like this trail of blue. And he's watching this, and he's like, "What are you Americans doing to like hockey? It's like, what's this whole blue puck?" And the whole thing was to make it look more visually stimulating, and they were all like, oh, "You Americans." I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm embarrassed to be an American right now.
He's like, one more reason I hate you guys.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, Chris is they're all like really just like good people, love to play practical jokes, love to have fun, but when they put on their instrument, they are a whole other thing. Chris is like so focused. Chris reminds me of Dave Mustaine a lot when he plays, because it is like there's a focus and an intensity. It's pretty wild to watch. And then there's like Luke from Good Riddance, where Luke plays with his whole arm. You watch him play, and he plays with his whole body, and you're thinking he's going to knock this guitar out of tune, and he never does, because it's all technique. So these players like in the studio are doing all these things, and I think and that's what gives them their sound. They all have a thing. It's just our job as a engineer producer to capture that moment in time.
So I saw you did Guttermouth, and I just remember stories about these guys. Like, what the fuck was that like with those guys?
So how I ended up getting the Guttermouth record was random. A friend of mine, Steve Krovac, who worked over at West Beach, he's an engineer producer, and he was working on the Guttermouth record. They were working on something. I think time ran out. They were trying to fix like a tuning issue or something. So I get a call from Steve asking if I had any time to finish off the record. I was like, sure. Made time, got those guys in, and it was something else. Was it? I want to say, was it drummer's name Bobby?
Oh, I have no idea. Let me look it up.
Bobby was doing these, I think something called Uptime, which you could get at 7-Eleven. I think they were like caffeine pills or something. He would pop a couple of those, and I was like, one day, I go, what the hell are those? And he goes, oh, you get these over at 7-Eleven. They'll give you energy. And I was like, well, I need energy. And he goes, well, you're kind of a big guy. He goes, take two. And I was like, okay. And I took two of them. I thought my heart was going to explode out of my chest. It was it was the gnarliest 6 hours of my life. It was like nothing moved fast enough. It was it was basically speed that you could buy at 7-Eleven.
But those like those yellow jacket pills that would be at the counter.
Maybe it was something like that, but they were called Uptime. They definitely got rid of them, and probably for good reason, because man, that was that day recording with them was gnarly. But I just remember Mark getting out there to sing. My first comment was, "Can you sound a little less like Fat Mike?"
Oh shit!
I mean, he sounded like Mike, and he goes, "But that's kind of what I sound like." And I'm like, "Okay, well, I just thought I would ask." I don't know the band. Again, didn't know the band. I didn't know the tone. Get out there, you sing. I didn't know if he was just trying to sound like him, or if that's just what his tone was. I would definitely speak before I think. I do that in general. It's like, well, this is just what's on my mind. Deal with it, process it. If you're not doing well, I'm going to say, hey, you could do better. We're going to do this until you do it right.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if what your style is. I mean, it seems like you've kind of dipped into it here and there through what you're talking about, but do you know who Steve Evans is? He did like Lifetime and Kid Dynamite. He was like a Jersey.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like he was known for like do it again until it's literally perfect, like make it people play over and over and over again until it was tight. Like what was your style like in that sense?
It was, I will never ask anybody to do something I know they can't do because that's unfair.
Hmm.
But when I know somebody's potential, I will hammer on them until we get the best possible thing we can. But you have to remember, I had to be very calculated on how much time we would spend because our budgets were low and we had a lot to do in a very short amount of time. I would know when the cutoff would be. As an example, we were working on it must have been in like 2000, 2001. It was a NOFX record. And Fat Mike is a really good bass player.
Yeah.
And I think very underestimated as a bass player. And he played the verse to a song. If I remember correctly, this had to have been in 2000 because we didn't get Pro Tools yet. So we were on 2-inch tape. I was like, man, you could come up with something much better than that on the verse. He's like, it's good. And I go, it's not. You could do something better. And he goes, it's fine. Okay. And I said, okay, let's listen back. And we listened back. And when it hit the verse, I went into record. And he's like, where's my bass? And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. I pushed the record button.
Oh no.
It looks like you have to play it again. And he just looked at me and he was like, ugh. I said, just work on a part. Just take a minute and work on a part. And he did. And finally was like, how's this? And I was like, so good. And went back and recorded it. So it would be, things like that. Keep everything funny. When somebody gets into a rut and they overthink it, I'll always pull out a one-liner. Come on, my grandmother could do this better. Hey, what time is it? It's 8 o'clock. No wonder you're fucking up. It's amateur hour. I had a list of things that would call out the situation, but keep it really funny. It had to be funny. If it got too tense, you're working 16, 17 hours a day. How do you want it to not be fun? Because if it's not fun, you're going to be even more tired and more drained. So everything had to be fun. Never ask anybody to do something that they couldn't do, but I will hammer on a line. I hammered on one line for 45 minutes.
Like a bass line?
Vocal line. It was like, no. Sharp, you're flat. Do it again. It's pretty good for you, but do it again. It was all, again, just trying to get the best possible performance for the time that we had.
Did anything come out where you looked back and you're like, fuck, that got through and I want to fix it? I mean, I'm sure there's got to be some things where you're like, there's little tiny things that, not mistakes, but just some sound or something that you're like, fuck, I wish I could go back and fix that.
Yeah, I think that all my fixing would have been done in the mix. Every record that has been released that I would love to go back and remix properly. I think that everything that the bands did, it was there. For what we did and how we captured it was fantastic. I will put everything on me. There is nothing that, I don't think that there's one song out there that I wouldn't want to go back and be able to spend just an extra hour on every song, just to balance it out a little bit more, to capture a little bit more something.
That would just be the mix.
On the mix, yeah. I made sure that we got everything that we needed for a successful record captured. And sometimes that would go into the mix time, but I was okay with that.
You said earlier that Mike would just be like, hey, here's a budget. Can you do it for this? And you're like, sure. Was there ever a time you told him no?
No, very, very rarely. I think everybody was very aware of what needed to get done. Again, it goes back to what we talked about earlier. If I said no, then we're going to have this debate of, well, why? Well, you know what? Because of the time. Well, but it will only take us 5 minutes to do. Well, but that 5 minutes will calculate into 10 minutes and we need to get set up. We need to keep this whole thing moving. Well, that conversation right there, you could have had half of what they probably wanted to get done. So why not just do it? And that way they feel like it's another thing off their checklist. They don't have to look back and go, God, I really wish. Now I'm the person that goes back and goes, yeah, I really wish.
Is there a story that you have never told in an interview that you've always wanted to tell that, and you can tell it now?
Ooh, story. I think the one that we talk about a lot is the Making Friends record, No Use for a Name.
Yeah, it's a great record.
That was, that was our Making Enemies. The tracking of that record went okay, but when it came time to mix, it was insanely tense.
Why?
So had a pair of NS10s, a boombox, and a pair of big speakers, and mixed the first song, listened to it on all three sets of speakers, and everybody loved it. And then they would take a cassette out to the car. In the car, it sounded muddy. And then they would come in and they would say, it sounds muddy. And I said, it's probably the cassette. Well, we play other cassettes in there and it's fine. It's probably the cassette. It could be the cassette deck that we have at the studio. But if you're listening to it on three sets of speakers in here and it sounds good and they're completely different sets of speakers and you're looking at a unmastered cassette, more than likely it's a cassette. And we went into some pretty tense times, enough that Fat Mike had to come down. They're like, lower the bass, lower the bass, lower the bass. And it's like, you're basing right now in the control room, there's no bass, like none. Well, that sounds really good, though, in the car. It was like, okay, so you want me to mix like I'm mixing a Ghost, because there's no way that I have no sense of the mix because the bass is so low. So it got really, really tense. After that, the band stopped talking to me. Record went off to mastering. Eddie Schreier mastered the record, and Eddie gets the record and he calls me. He goes, "Hey, you know I mastered a lot of your records." And I said, "Yes." And he goes, "I just got this record." He goes, "I just want to let you know that there's no bass on your record." And I said, "I know. Please do whatever you can to address it." So Eddie put in a little extra time and was able to kind of work the bottom end enough that it would be listenable. So
What?
I remember going to a Christmas party, a Fat Records Christmas party, and a few of the band members were very, very cold to me, and I was really hurt, because I was just being honest with them, and it was a whole thing. And then it was back in, like, I think in January or February, the studio phone rings, and it's Tony. And Tony, I pick up the phone, and he goes, "Ryan." I go, "Tony?" And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "How you doing?" And I go, "Oh my God, it's so good to hear from you. And, how are you? Happy New Year." And he goes, "I have to apologize." I'm like, "Apologize for what?" He goes, "I have to apologize for what happened in the studio." He goes, "I just want to let you know you were 100% right." And that, that meant the world to me. That he knew what I was going through when he listened back, that he had perspective and was able to understand why I was so adamant about what I was hearing. And it opened up a whole new relationship for Tony and I.
I was gonna say, because you did like 6 more releases with them after Making Friends.
Yeah, we did a few, for sure. It really said a lot. I remember, Tony didn't like to fly. There was one day I get a phone call from Tony. Answer this, of course, the studio phone, and I'm like, "Hey, Ryan." He goes, "It's Tony." I go, "Tony, how are you?" He goes, "Good. I'm here at the airport with Bridget and getting ready to go to Hawaii." And I was like, "Oh, that's great." And he goes, "Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. What's going on?" And we just had this conversation. Didn't think anything of it. Fast forward at Tony's celebration of life, afterwards, went to Bridget's house, and on the way out, Bridget turned to me and she said, "Do you remember when Tony called you and we were on our way to Hawaii?" And I said, "I do." And she goes, "Just want to let you know that he was having a really hard time. He had a lot of anxiety and he was really worried about getting on the plane. And I told him to give you a call because you always make him feel good." I was like, oh my God, now it makes sense. To that day, I just thought it was like kind of a random call. But that it kind of dives in a little bit on the relationships that were developed with a lot of people in the scene. That we were all there for each other.
That I just got choked up when you said that. That is intense. Damn. Fuck, man. Well, I think that is the way to end this. There's no way to top that. That's an amazing story. Well, I do ask two questions. I am going to end it that way, but I feel like as a story wise and all that, that's good. All right. So before I ask the last two, and the last one, I don't know how it's going to work when I ask it, but before that, do you have anything you want to plug? It could be about you. It could be about a friend doing something cool. It could be about both.
Oh, I have many friends that are doing very, very cool things.
It's great.
Everybody does cool things. It's I wish there was a certain plug I could do. Honestly, no, everybody that I know and the circle of friends that I have, that I'm just like inspired by everyone. And I think that's what kind of keeps me going is just the energy that people put into projects, and it's not necessarily even music. It could be anything. That I hope that people do realize that you may think that you're doing something that may not make a difference, but everything that you do actually makes a difference. And everybody changes people's lives. So just keep doing that.
I think that kind of answers the next question. I think I might just leave it at that, but you might just be like, I have no idea answer
Oh, ask it anyhow.
Okay. What scene ethics do you hold on to this day?
That's a good question. I don't know if I can answer that because I'm no different than I was before I entered the scene. I just kind of am who I am. Did that answer it?
That works.